Hey, welcome back. And now for our last lesson of our rationals unit, our mod F, is solving rational equations. All right, the rules for rational equations: number one, factor everything. That's important. That's what we've been doing pretty much every single lesson here. Two, look at the denominators and determine the values that x cannot equal. Because again, remember, you cannot have 0 in the denominator. So if you find the value of x that makes the denominator 0, x can't equal that because it's not allowed. Then we're going to cancel out each fraction by multiplying by its denominator. And then we're going to do that process until all the fractions are gone out of the equation. And then we're going to solve for x. And it becomes a nice, easy equation to deal with. So let's go to it. All right, our first set are proportions. Proportions are pretty easy. We've been doing them for a while in your life. Okay, all you do is take the opposite denominator and multiply it, or in this case with the 4, you're going to distribute it to the numerator on the other side. So here you've got 3 times 3x getting you 9x. 4 times 5 is 20x, and then 4 times 1 is 4. Now solve, subtract the 20, divide by negative 11, and you get x equals negative 4/11. Oops, let's make that 11. Okay, so here, you're going to cross multiply the x plus 9 times the 1. Then you're going to go the 4 minus 5x times the 3. So 4 times 3 is 12. Negative 5x times 3 is negative 15x. Now we solve. I'm going to add the 15x over. Got ahead of myself here. Now subtract the 9 and divide by 16. Okay, now each time you do this, you have to look at your denominators, okay, especially starting here, because you have x's in the denominator. Okay, we look at it and go, all right, well, if it's negative 9, that would make this 0. Over here, if x were 4/5, that would make it 0. So here, these are the values x cannot be. And so once you solve an equation, check to make sure that your answer doesn't match any of those numbers. Because if it does, then you're going to have no solution. Okay? So 3, if we look at this, we look at here first, that's going to be negative 1/3. And if you look at this, you're going to end up taking the square root of a negative number, which doesn't happen. So therefore, x can only not equal negative 1/3. Okay? So here we go. Let's cross multiply. So 2 times 3x squared is 6x squared, and 2 times 11 is 22. Cross multiply, 6x times x is 6x squared, and 2 times x is 2x. Both sides of the equation has a 6x squared, so they will cancel each other out. Now divide by 2, and you get 11 equals x, which is not negative 1/3, so therefore it is an acceptable solution. Now, what happens if we're adding and subtracting fractions? Okay, well here, this is where we start multiplying by denominators to get rid of the fractions. So if you look at number 4, our very first fraction has a denominator of 5. So what I'm going to do is, because a fraction is like dividing by 5, we're going to multiply by 5. And since it's an equation, if you do it to one term, you have to do it to all terms. And so what happens is this 5 and this 5 cancel out, leaving you with 2y plus 5 times 2 is 10 over 6 equals 5 times y is 5y over 2, and minus 5 times 1 is 5 over 6. Now you look at your next fraction. The denominator is 6. So that means every term, even that 2y, gets multiplied by 6. And what you get out of this is 6 times 2y is 12y. This 6 and this 6 cancel out, giving you plus 10. Here, the 2 will cancel out the 2 that makes the 6 and make it 3. So 3 times 5y is 15y. And this 6 and this 6 will cancel out, leaving minus 5. Now solve this equation. Subtract 12y from both sides. Add 5 to both sides. And then divide by 3. And we get an answer of 5 equals y. Okay. Now, if you look at your problem, there's no y's in the denominator, so therefore there are no values that y can't be, so this is an acceptable answer. Okay? Now look at 5. Okay, go through, we have an x squared minus 1, so we're going to have to factor. So let's factor everything. So factor out of 2, and you get 2 times x plus 1. Over here you get x plus 1 times x minus 1, and that's going to equal 1 over x minus 1. Okay? So now look at your first fraction, 1 over 2 times x plus 1. We need to get rid of it, so that means we're going to multiply by 2 times x plus 1. And over here we're going to multiply by 2 times x plus 1. And here, 2 times x plus 1. So what we end up getting is this whole thing cancels out with this whole thing, leaving us with 1, plus this x plus 1 cancels out with that x plus 1. 5 times 2 is 10 over x minus 1. Then over here, nothing cancels out. I'm going to go ahead and distribute that 2 back through. And we're going to get 2x plus 2 over x minus 1. Now looking at the second fraction, we have an x minus 1 in the denominator, so that means we're going to multiply everything by x minus 1. And so now 1 times x minus 1 is x minus 1, plus x minus 1 cancels out top and bottom, so that's plus 10, equals that x minus 1 and that x minus 1 cancel out, leaving us with 2x plus 2. Now, solve this equation. We're going to combine the negative 1 and 10 to get x plus 9 equals 2x plus 2. Subtract the x from both sides. We get 9 equals x plus 2. Subtract the 2 from both sides and you get 7 equals x. Okay, so that one was a little bit longer, but it's really not super terrible. You can just feel a little bit tedious at times. All right, and of course, if you look at this, you have the x plus 1, x minus 1, so that means x couldn't be negative 1 or 1. That doesn't match up with 7, so 7 is an answer we can keep. Now, if you look at number 6, okay, the first fraction we run into has an x minus 2 in the denominator. So that is what we are going to multiply by. And now, since we're multiplying everything by x minus 2, here we're going to distribute the x and get x squared minus 2x. Okay, here, this x minus 2 and that x minus 2 cancel out, so that's left us with plus 10 equals, now here the x minus 2's cancel out, and we get x squared plus 3x. Now, there's an x squared on both sides. They're going to cancel each other out when you subtract them away. So now I'm going to add 2x over. I'm going to divide by 5, and you get 2 equals x. Now, since in the denominator we had x minus 2, if we solve that, we get x equals 2, which, because it's in the denominator, x cannot equal 2. Our answer was x equals 2. That cannot be our answer, so that means this becomes a no solution. And that is the end of solving rational equations.